Well, hey, Lighthouse, it's Friday, so it's question and answer time, question and conversation time. But there weren't any questions this week. Nobody sent any questions, so I thought I might share with you the most important question that could possibly be asked. It's a question that Jesus asked. It's a question Jesus asked Peter right in the middle of Philippi and Caesarea, at Caesarea Philippi. And it says this. First of all, there's a story of the blind man at Bethsaida. And they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes, he laid hands on him and asked him, "Do you see anything?" And he looked up and said, "I see people, but they look like trees walking." So Jesus performs a incomplete healing? No, it's not an incomplete healing. It's not really even a two-stage healing. It's actually a comment about Peter. Watch, let's keep going. "Do you see anything?" And he looked up and said, "I see people, but they look like trees walking." Then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he opened his eyes, and his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. And he sent him to his home, saying, "Do not even enter the village." Well, we haven't gotten to our question yet, but this is really important where Mark puts this story. Mark puts the story of a man who is completely blind, and then by his interaction with Jesus, he sees a little bit. He sees people, but they're like trees walking around, so he can see, but he can't see clearly enough. And then, of course, Jesus brings him to full healing. That was Jesus' plan the whole time. But the way Jesus performs this miracle and the way Mark puts it, right before this conversation again, one of the questions you're always asking is, why this story? Why in this spot? And so right after that, Peter confesses Jesus is the Christ. And Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" That's a really important question. We love to challenge our culture with that. You know, it's low hanging fruit. It's pretty easy to do, but it's something that, you know, is, I don't know if we like doing it, but it's something that's a normal thing for us to look at the culture and go, "Hey, you don't know Jesus. Hey, you've got the wrong version of Jesus." So Jesus asked Peter, "Hey, who do people say that I am?" Or asked the disciples, and they told him, "John the Baptist." Some people say that you're John the Baptist. Others say Elijah, the return of the great prophet, and others one of the other prophets. And he asked them, "But who do you say I am?" And Peter answered him, "You are the Christ." And he strictly charged them to tell no one. So again, we have Jesus asking the most important question, and I would really encourage you to think about not the knee-jerk reaction to that, but really, who do you say Jesus is? It is the most important thing, more than any social issue, more than any issue in your family, more than any other theological issue. The most important thing about us is simply how we answer the question, who's Jesus? Now, Peter apparently has a good answer. He says, "You are the Christ." Great answer, Pete. But the story keeps going. "And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days, rise again." And he said this plainly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. See, Peter sees, but Peter doesn't see clearly. Just like the guy who could see, but saw shapes walking around, not people in full view. Peter sees Jesus. He's able to confess he's the Christ. But Peter, as of yet, has not come to a full understanding of what it means to follow Jesus. So Peter is happy to say, "Jesus, you're the Christ. You're the Messiah. You're the anointed one." But as soon as Jesus starts talking about his own sacrifice, Peter pulls Jesus aside and rebukes him. See, Mark puts this story of this, nuanced two-part healing, or the half a healing and then a complete healing, right before the story of Peter, because this is Peter's experience too. And we need to not be those who, like Peter, would be very quick to go, Jesus, you are the Christ. And then as soon as any talk of suffering, any talk of sacrifice, any talk of self-denial comes up, well, actually, we pull Jesus aside and go, hey, stop it. Keep reading. And but turning and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. So Peter, I think you could even say, Peter has been able to identify who Jesus is, but he hasn't been able to identify how to follow him. And if he doesn't know how to follow him, does he really know who he is? Man, let's not be guilty of that same thing, but let's be those who not only know that Jesus is the Messiah, that Jesus is God, that Jesus is the Savior, but let us also be those who are willing to follow Jesus on his terms. And calling the crowd together to him with his disciples, he said to them, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Who is Jesus is the most important question of your life. Is he just a religious leader? Was he just a good man? Is he an ideal? Or is he the Messiah? But Peter needed to know that it wasn't just lip service, but rather it was a life of self-denial that would prove that he knew who Jesus was. So it's not just those of us that can confess Jesus with our mouth, Jesus, you're the Savior, and yet don't live a life of serving him, don't live a sacrificial life of loving others. Man, we see, but we're kind of seeing people like trees walking around. We just don't see clearly. It's not until we go, oh, what could I trade for my soul? Of course, I will lay down everything, Jesus, and I will follow you, because I not only know with my head and profess with my mouth that you're the Savior, but I'm prepared to live like it too. Hey, if you have questions, send them to questions@lighthousebaptist.net. But until then, who do you say Jesus is? Hey, beloved,